and start with the Bible.
Hi there, future generations. This is Father Kowalski from Our Lady of Grace in Greensboro, North Carolina. A little bit about myself. I was ordained in 1993 in Newark, New Jersey. So I am a Yankee with this beautiful accent, and came down to this diocese, the Diocese of Charlotte, 5 years after that. So I've been in the diocese since roughly 1999, and was parochial vicar here at Our Lady of Grace 13 years ago, and came back 4 years ago as the pastor. So that's who I am, and I'm happy to be in your living rooms, on your iPods or your tablets or wherever you're viewing this.
Okay, so our topic of discussion today is the relics that are found in every church and why they're important.
Okay. First of all, what is a relic? A relic, and it sounds, especially if you're not Catholic, and people kind of look at this as one of those odd little quirks about the Catholic Church, having to do with dead bodies, and that's what everybody talks about. What's going on with the skeletons and the dead bodies and all of that kind of stuff. A relic, there are three types of relics. There are three classes of relic. The first is first class relic, which is actually usually some of the bones or a piece of bone from one of the saints. And most of the relics are usually that of martyrs, but it doesn't necessarily have to be just martyrs. The ones that are in the altar here and in most of the churches usually do come from that classification as martyrs, those who died for the faith. A second class relic is an object or something that belonged to the saint or was touched to the first class relic. Well, more so that, so like in the case of St. John Vianney, when he died, his cassock was, because it belonged to him, his cassock was cut up into little pieces and then given to the faithful. So that would be a second class relic. Third class relic is an object that's just touched to the first class relic. So those are the most common out of the three. So why does the church get into this whole thing about relics? Because it goes back to the early church, to the persecutions of the church, when the church went underground. And in going underground, were those who were giving their lives for the church. The devotion to those men and women who died was as heroes. And so the faithful, it was not uncommon that if a saint was martyred and his blood, people would take cloths to wipe up some of the blood, to have it, as a powerful means to intercede with that particular saint. So that's where that whole kind of beginning of relics kind of came from. They're a connection to our past and to the men and women who are of our faith that we consider brothers and sisters in Christ. And as such, we look at them and we turn to them and ask for their prayers, ask for their intercession. So how a relic came to be in a church goes back to that being underground when the church was in persecution. Masses were offered in the crypts, so in the burial, the underground caverns in Rome, and so the Christians hid from the authorities there. And what did they have? They basically had coffins the sarcophagi for the people who were buried, and it's kind of the shape of a desk. It's the right height and the right size. So the early Christians made use of that and offered Mass on on top of the coffin of those who had died. And out of that comes later what we have in the fact that we usually have a relic, which can be a very, very small piece of, usually a bone of a saint. And it is placed in the altar. And it's done that way. So every time the priest kisses the altar at Mass, he's kissing that spot where the relic is. And in a sense, going back to our beginning and having that connection over the centuries from those who gave their lives and who died. So that's kind of the 5-cent version of where, why churches have these things in their altars.
So, could you go into a little bit about what it exactly housed Our Lady of Grace specifically and how it's significant to the church?
Okay, we have the high altar, which is the beautiful marble altar here. We also have 2 side altars in the Chapman Street Chapel, which is now also kind of our cry room and kind of a quasi-vestibule entry point into the church. So there's 3 altars there, and we have 2 more smaller ones in the back of the church. And the reason that we have so many, not to mention the freestanding movable altar, so 6. The reason for the altar and for so many was when this church was consecrated, it was prior to the reforms of the Second Vatican Council. So concelebration where more than one priest was at the same Mass, what they concelebrated, that was not permitted. So in a parish this size, where you usually had at least 2 priests, and if not a third coming in to help, they were not able to all together be at the one Mass. So the priest would say Mass on the high altar, and then the other 2 would say Masses privately on one of the side chapels. So because of that, and because of the church's regulation about having a first-class relic embedded into the altar, we had several saints' relics here. And so that's kind of the background as to why we have them. When this church was built and dedicated, it was 1952, the bishop at the time was Bishop Waters. And to obtain relics for building, to putting in the new church, you have to go to Rome, and you have to petition the Holy See. So Bishop Waters petitioned the Holy See through what's called the Apostolic Nuncio. That's kind of the Washington, D.C. American headquarters. So he's kind of like the ambassador to the United States. So Bishop Waters contacted him and said, I'm getting ready to consecrate a church. I need some relics. So the nuncio at the time contacted Rome, and then the relics were sent. And they're not very large relics. I mean, when we're talking about that, they can be as small as almost like the head of a matchstick. So it can be very small. Now there are larger relics that you see in other churches around the world. When the Congregation of the Marians was here, St. Faustina, part of her major relic was here, first-class relic, and it was a piece of her finger. So that was a bit larger, but what's in the altars here is very, very small. The main altar is a very ancient saint. There were 4 of them that were sent here, and that was St. Auctus, Auctus. And St. Auctus was an early martyr. His dates are basically like the 300s, so the early church. And what happened is the relics of Octus, Amancia, Fulgentius, and Eutropius were all given to Bishop Waters. And the one that we have the documentation for the high altar, for the big altar, was St. Octus. So we know that. But because we have the other altars, we know that, although I can't tell you which one is in which, we also have, like I said, Eutropius, Fulgentius, and Amancia, and they were all martyred in the 3, 4, and early 500s AD. So they go back that far, but that's who we have here. Now, St. Octus actually does have a memorial feast day in the church calendar. That's November 7th, and but we don't normally kind of celebrate it because after the Second Vatican Council, they changed the calendar, and kind of devotion to St. Octus kind of went by the wayside because not much is known other than the fact that they were very early martyrs during periods of persecution. So that's kind of where we're at.
Sorry. So is there a time, when the relics come out from the altars, like to be displayed or to be cleaned or something, or are they just permanently in there?
These, the relics that are in the altars are actually sealed in there during the consecration. So we had several parishes and churches in the diocese that the bishop consecrated them. And what happens is usually the altar is marble, and in the center there's a cavity that's left for the relics to be placed. And once they're placed, if you watch the ceremony, the bishop will take basically mortar and a trowel and seal the stone in place. So they, once they're in there, they're in there. Now that doesn't mean that churches don't have other particular relics that they will bring out for different days. Now we are lucky that we have first class relic of Saint Faustina, not the big one, the finger, but a small piece, small relic that we took out for veneration on Divine Mercy Sunday, because that was so people come up and they would kiss the relic and receive a blessing. We're also blessed that we were just given a relic of Saint Maria Goretti, because her body came here 2 years ago, in October of 2015. The Holy See allowed a pilgrimage of the body of Saint Maria Goretti to go to 40 churches in the United States, and we were one of the 40. So she laid in state in a glass coffin for 18 hours, and we had almost 8,000 people that came through the doors. So we were very lucky after that to have a small first-class relic of St. Faustina. And her feast day is July 6th, so we'll be bringing her relic out for a public veneration on July 6th when we have the procession and all of that. So you do have those relics that parishes have. And the younger priests really are kind of rediscovering this devotion. So if you talk to any of those that have pretty much been ordained in the last 5 years, and when they're in parishes, they're bringing and reintroducing the love, the love and the devotion of the saints through the relics. So you're starting to see more of that. But here, when they're in there, they ain't going anywhere.
So when you said there's pilgrimages, is that like a common thing that OG will be visited, or is that just like a?
There are people that do come here. I mean, we do get a lot of visitors. More so more so for Divine Mercy, because that's been here longer. Although St. Maria Goretti has been here 2 years, and there are people that will come to Mass here and hear about it and want to come for that. So it's starting to pick up, and I'm very blessed for that. I think that's we're fairly easy to get to, and on any given Sunday, it's so nice when you're greeting people to have them come up and say, "This is our first time, and we just love it, and we want to come back." And just tell them, "Come on back."
So is there any other way that the relics affect the life of the parish or events or anything like that?
You know, it's interesting that it can enhance your spiritual life, your liturgical life, your life of prayer. And with St. Maria Goretti, for instance, I receive quite often notes from people who will say, because not only because her relic is here, although not publicly displayed all year, but securely kept in the sacristy, that by her intercession prayers have been answered, and miracles have occurred, where you're usually obliged in the major pilgrimage, with what's called the major relics, which is pretty much her skeleton. On those formal type of pilgrimages, you're usually asked to submit a report back to the Holy See as to the spiritual benefits and the fruits that have come. And I've received hundreds of emails and accounts of spiritual and emotional and physical healings, that took place through St. Maria's intercession. Families who were estranged, because she is known as a very powerful intercessor for, most especially for forgiveness, because she was brutally savage and murdered as a young girl because a young man wanted to rape her, and she fought him off, and he stabbed her to death. And on her deathbed, she forgave him and said, "I do so because I want you to be with Jesus." And as a girl who was like 12, so the heroic life of her and heroic virtue really speaks to people. And so I've gotten testimonials from people who have said that family members that they struggled to forgive for years, and by praying to St. Maria Goretti, they were able to do that. And I've saw it myself in just sitting off silently to the side as people were coming up to the relic and just placing their hands on the case, and just to see the faith and the tremendous peace. So it does have a very profound impact, but you have to be open to it. That's the thing. So often our churches can forget about these things and say, "Oh, well, that's just kind of old school stuff. We're contemporary, so we don't do that." But it's a part of who we are, and it should be a witness, and it should be a support and an encouragement to know that whatever you're facing, whatever the struggle may be, there are those who have gone before who have struggled and who have persevered and who have overcome and won. And that's what the relics and all of that connection kind of help us maintain. So it's work, though, and I have to be honest, with that, it's a matter of making them available as people. We get so busy that when somebody comes and says, "Father, can I hold, can I touch, or can I have a blessing from the relic?" you know, you're tempted to go, well, I've really got other things I got to do. But then you say, no, wait a minute, this is why we're here, to give people that opportunity for that moment of contact and that point of contact. Because you never know what that's going to set in motion for them in their journey. So, you know, St. Peter, when the man who was crippled came to him and asked to be healed, you know, he says, gold and silver I have not, but what I have I give you. And what did he give him? He gave him a blessing, and that provided healing for him. So it's not gold or silver that they're coming here for, but they're coming here for that grace of God and that point of contact and that intercession. So it's a wonderful thing.
Do you have any final things you want to add?
At this point, actually, no. Other than to encourage you to learn about the saints, learn about the relics and things that are in your parish. And if you ask the priest, sometimes that information is not readily, available. But ask and open yourself to learning about why that relic is there and the connection that it has, to your parish, to your life of faith. And see it not just as this kind of odd kind of quirk from the past, but as a very real connection. So every time I kiss that altar at the beginning of Mass, you're transcending time to go all the way back to the 300s to a person like yourself who had faith and who struggled and who actually sacrificed for that faith. And then I pray for myself and for us that we have the same courage if we would ever to face that type of persecution, that we would have the same courage as these saints did. So it's a really powerful connection between us because that's what we're here for. We're part of that bigger family of faith. So I'm very happy that you were here today, and I'm honored to be able to answer these questions.
Thank you so much for helping us out.
You are very welcome. God bless you. Awesome.
Thank you so much.
I am happy.
That was great.
I'm
It's really informative. Like, we actually didn't know anything about this.
No, yeah, that's why we picked this topic. Because we really wanted to learn.
Well, it's a cool thing, and I'm happy to be able to. I think the word is out that you just point a camera and I talk. So happy to do it.